live from all of our respective quarantine zones with super producer Matt Leck.
Yo.
Chief economist and China advocate David Griscom.
How's it going?
Dude, you're very shadowy shot today, brother.
I know. I'm just watching the sunset. I'll be done in a second.
Oh, I love it. Continue to bring the poetic vibe. Lord knows we need it on this week's program. Great doubleheader. Judah Freidlander is here, stand-up comedian. You've seen him in many places, most especially I want to really plug his most recent stand-up special. We'll be talking about that. And of course, how to be number one, how to be a world champion. That's what you talk to Judah about. And we'll definitely get his thoughts on politics. Very, very excited to have him on the show. Yolian Ogbu. I will get this right. Always as I deal with my... For an international relations major who does all this global content, the pronunciations are trash, but I do my best. We're talking with her. She's an organizer, an activist. We're talking about strikes in the age of Corona, including one planned for May 1st. And we're going to be talking about how to get active in that way right now. Very excited about that conversation. Of course, we've got a gem with David Griscom. We've got a jam-packed postgame. Donald Trump is threatening to use federal aid to punish states and try to take away sanctuary cities. Sergio Moro is out. He's glorified by the global media, but he's the U.S.-backed head of the Lava Jato farce, which made Lula a political prisoner and paved the way for Jair Bolsonaro, who is in the political crosshairs in Brazil, even as Corona continues to wreak havoc across that country. We've got a rebel music history with Joshua Kahn Russell. Matt Iglesias took our boy Ben Burgess way out of context. And the New York Democratic Party is taking Bernie Sanders off of the ballot. Now, could it be that maybe now, in light of recent reporting, as well as innumerable other things, maybe Democratic voters might like to at least pretend to have an option? Pretend to have a plan B, C, or D? Well, not, of course, if Andrew Cuomo, who, as he is attempting to viciously implement austerity, even in the midst of a coronavirus he set off, of course, he helped set off, of course, he is not protecting democracy in New York State. We'll get to that and a whole bunch more, including Trump using the Defense Production Act to reopen meatpacking, which is another area of abuse of migrant rights, ecological crisis, and of course, a hotbed of Corona throughout the country. We're going to get to all of that and much, much more on this week's program. Hey, everybody. I'll say up top, I'm fine. I'm fighting something off, but I know that it is obviously not the thing. So I want to preemptively apologize if I'm in any way off. I have been fighting a cold, but that's definitely not something that anybody's going to complain about in today's world. I want to talk, though, up front about why class still matters. In fact, class politics is the only hope of any type of durable left-wing politics possible. Now, does class politics mean that we don't take care of and address and care about every other area of discrimination, domination, or unnecessary and false social and political hierarchy? Of course not. And it also doesn't mean that we exclude the vast range of human interest and capacities. This show is obviously interested in the philosophical and the spiritual and the scientific in a lot of different ways that can influence politics and help human thriving and all of the really important disagreements and arguments that go along with that. But at base, if we want a truly democratic politics, which is left politics in the proper sense, of a democratized economy, of people with a greater say substantively over all areas of their lives, and the material abundance for all to get rid of the obscenities of poverty and squalor and other absolutely unnecessary things. There is no way we are getting there without class politics. Bernie Sanders understood that, and that's why Bernie Sanders should always get our undying good New Dealism. And that's exactly what it is. An absolutely bare minimum necessary 21st century completion of the New Deal, a New Deal of which, for all of its flaws and imperfections and political deal making, has obviously done more for the well-beings of Americans than anything else in terms of social delivery along the lines of national material programs than other comparable social delivery efforts of the 20th and certainly 21st century. Social Security and programs like that still benefit people today. Now, some have argued that because the Democratic Party and even more left-wing members of the Democratic Party are overly represented by college-educated voters, that the future of democratic and progressive politics lays not in restoring a class politics, but in a liberal professional managerial class, the Warren coalition. Now, the easy point out of the gate here, obviously, is that in spite of coming up short, Bernie Sanders' campaign was radically more successful than Elizabeth Warren's campaign. And Bernie, in fact, particularly in the incredible moment in Nevada, pulled together a modern 21st century public goods-based working class universal coalition. That's something that Warren, with the PMC identity politics, could never even remotely attempt to approach. So that's number one. And that is very easy to respond to a lot of the very flawed and shaky and delusional arguments we've seen peddled. But let's talk briefly about a much stronger one, which was put forward by Eric Levitz, who I've interviewed several times, who's a great writer for New York Magazine, someone whom, if you disagree with, it doesn't matter. You absolutely should read him. He's a very, very smart, fair-minded, engaging guy. And I actually hope in the coming weeks we can have him on TMBS to talk about this article specifically. Why Americans don't vote their class anymore. He argues a couple of important things here. He talks about how Bernie Sanders' loss basically showed a sort of that there was a limit to the working class appeal and argument. He compared and contrasted Joe Manchin, one of the most right-wing members of the Democrats in Congress, in fact, senator from West Virginia, who's ultra right-wing Democrat, with Ro Khanna, who, of course, represents a very affluent Silicon Valley area and is, relatively speaking, progressive. Now, of course, this argument can go both ways. Chuck Schumer certainly represents many affluent people and certainly caters to the affluent of the state of New York. And Nancy Pelosi, who is virulently opposed to Medicare for all and most famously known during the corona pandemic for her shot in front of her ice cream fridge, of course, also represents an extraordinarily wealthy district. But the point is absolutely valid that as for now, there are more people inside the sort of professional managerial class that also gravitate towards Bernie as well. And that no polls showed that there would be a fundamental change in the electorate. Yes, he probably, and Levitz acknowledges, would perform better with a broader set of working class voters than other Democratic candidates, but not in a way that would fundamentally shift the electorate. Now, again, let's reorient a short-term thing. The Nevada primary is the future of working class and progressive politics. And it's not enough to just think that the PMC class was mistaken in their belief in Warren. You have to look at the case studies of two potential paths of moving forward for this type of politics and then run it through the most relevant case study. And that is Nevada. And in that case, Bernie Sanders won by a landslide and Elizabeth Warren was nowhere to be seen. Now, more broadly, and this is not something that is going to be answered anytime soon and by any election cycle, it does go back to a familiar story that Levitz talks about and gives some credit to, but I think is unavoidable, which is that if you don't rebuild actual labor power and you don't have a political induction into the economic left that stands outside of college politics, not antithetical to, but outside of it as a distinct trajectory, as a distinct momentum, not attached to the social etiquettes, protocols, beliefs, and practices of the college class, but comes out of a truly broad universalist working class base. That means until that happens, there will never be any type of durable left, social democratic, or progressive coalition. And we could see that a even liberal-minded upper middle class has never produced the type of long-term durable gains that we're used to. We have to look that we could point to in the past. The founding of Brazil's Worker Party in 1980, which combined the incredible and unparalleled union leadership of Lula da Silva with liberation theologists as well as progressive intellectuals, might be a more relevant example in terms of the type of coalitions that we need to build moving forward. But even in that case, the lead was labor, and there is no getting around that component. It is a longer term project. It's not election in and election out, but working class consciousness is ultimately the base of how you can turn the one advantage that the workers have over capital, their labor, into a strategic offense. And that is, again, a fundamental difference between a sort of moral concern versus a strategic acting on one's own interest, and an interest that workers across the board, no matter who they are and where they come from, fundamentally share as workers. It will be difficult to do this without Bernie Sanders, but we need to get back into motion. We need to get back to our roots. We need to support labor organizing in every way, shape, and form. And we need to undertake, in all means and all ways possible, the long-term undertaking to restore labor politics and working class consciousness to the core of politics. Now, inside the PMC itself, there's a big split here. And obviously, some of the more downwardly mobile folks from that training gravitated towards Sanders. And work is going to include surplus labor, which is viciously excluded out of the labor market. It's going to have a totally different relationship to organizing and addressing the concerns of so-called freelance labor and the temporary economy. But at the end of the day, whether or not you're working in a factory, driving an Uber, or really doing almost anything else on any type of corporate or grand scale, you're in labor, and that fundamentally needs to be the base of any kind of left-wing politics. You guys have anything you want to add to that?
I just wanted to add, because I've been, I think Levitz's piece was very good, at least of putting up the counter argument to
definitely
our worldview. But I always find it funny when I think there's a misunderstanding from some folks about what the kind of Marxist theory of changes, and especially like the class-based politics. It's not that intrinsically people who are in the working class are always going to put forward a kind of like socialist politics. It's that the working class is a contradiction within the capitalist system, in the sense that they create the value of society, but everywhere they are being exploited and their labor is being, their labor is extracted from by like the capitalist class. So right. It's not the only political category that's possible. And that's a fundamental Marxist understanding. That's what Marx, when he writes his longer histories, for example, about like the counter-revolution in France, is that, it's not always this one worker consciousness that exists. There's a lot of other tendencies that exist within society. But the working class is one of the few classes that actually has the potential of being, in a sense, like universal, right? That it can cut across a lot of different social divisions to create a coherent interest, and that interest is the ending of their exploitation. So that's the kind of the nug, the center of socialist politics and socialist philosophy, is trying to find a way to build that understanding and that kind of socialist education to turn that into action. So it's not necessarily going to be that anytime a socialist runs for office, they're going to win all the working class voters, right? No. The point is that there's the potential there, and the job of socialist politics, the job of social strategy, is to try to tap into that energy to enact social change through it.
Right.
A lot of the criticisms that we get basically when you see a working class person, for example, just not being a socialist, I don't find to be convincing in a sense, any other sense other than the fact that like, oh, look, there's some work that you have to do, right? Look, there's something that you're missing here. And, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, obviously. But I think that we saw so many glimpses of its viability under the Bernie Sanders movement, and especially in Nevada. And especially in the fact, all the statistics of the income and the occupation of his average donors, etc.
Oh, I think that's a really important point. And I just add that he did have, the two people with working class coalitions were Biden and Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
And Sanders tapped the working class coalition in a way that, again, let's really remember here, is unprecedented in modern politics.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it needed to be more, and he needed to win, and a loss is a loss. I'm in no way trying to sugarcoat it. But he wasn't the 7% campaign. This was the second place finisher doing something that has not been done in modern politics. Now, Biden's working class was not based on either, the working class that voted for Biden were the same reasons that there were the affluents voting for Biden. Can he beat Trump?
Mm-hmm.
Completely time encapsulated question. No implications and ideological stakes. And I think that, but again, that universalist project is very important because it's the only actual base of labor power is that universalism in terms of actually changing politics and winning gains that sustain. And it's also, once you persuade people in that worldview, that's, less fickle than a demographic that, 20 years ago would be like, hey, I've got a chunk of the stock market and I have a nice job and I identify more with corporate America. Part of the reason that even like the PMC is in play the way it is simply because corporate America has actually gotten so unshackled from any type of check from overall labor that it is so out of control and ruthless that it's even starting to, basically, relatively speaking, privileged workers are getting taste of the medicine that people who've, really had to work for a living have had the whole time.
Yeah. And I think I'd also add too, it's like, look, there are there's a lot of merging of that kind of PMC class at times with like working class desires, right? In the short term, especially, we don't want Donald Trump. A lot of people do support ideas like Medicare for all. The class difference where it really starts to matter is just how far you're willing to go with the change and who you're willing to empower to make that change happen. And I think that was a fundamental cultural difference, for example, between like the Warren camp and the Bernie camp, right? There was a real hesitance on the Warren camp of this idea of kind of like letting the rabble rule, right? And that's where I think understanding those class divisions become even more important actually than just like the math of election day, right? That's when like the actual politics, the long-term political struggle will hit ahead more. Like, for example, if there was a Bernie Sanders in power, even if he went over like a vast majority of the PMC, there is an interest with that group that was antithetical towards the Bernie Sanders platform. Right. And understanding those tensions are important, not only in the short term for winning the elections, but also, in the long term for enacting the policies and the ideas that we want to put into place.
Absolutely. Let's do a little pitch and then let's get to our first guest. I'll just start by saying that, we still have our goals here. We have to get to 4,000 patrons. That's the next one on our horizon. Totally understand. Obviously, if that's not something you're capable of right now, you can, no worries, completely get it. We're definitely always happy to give people deals if they need deals, particularly people who've already been patrons. But if you're in a position where you can do it, you'll get about over 600 extra episodes at this point, theory readings, post games, and you're also supporting, a lot of additional content. We're not going to keep up at exactly the same pace, but there is a lot already, and some of it will keep up. We've been doing the additional Thursday show for the public. We've been doing the economic emergency series. If you haven't yet, I would definitely watch the episodes with Grace Blakely and Mark Blythe. Those are both really, really good. And again, it's just, we've started to unlock more so people can have a sense of it. You can definitely listen to back episodes on the Patreon webpage or download them when you subscribe to the Michael Brooks Show on iTunes. While you're there, if you haven't yet, throw us a 5-star review. But the thing to do, if you can, is go to patreon.com/TMBS and become a member and make sure you're all set and all squared away to get a massive amount of extra content, a global political education in theory, history, international relations, and also a lot of fun. The post games are long and fun. And I'll leave it at that for this one because we'll get to our guest in a minute. I also want to say the new book, Against the Web, is out. I would strongly recommend, you can still order it at Red Emma's. That is our fantastic worker-owned independent bookstore of choice. The book obviously has critiques of, the Jordan Peterson, the Sam Harris, and so on. It's written in such a way that it's trying to anticipate and respond to arguments that are going to last longer than even a kind of narrow exercise like the IDW. So if you're concerned, and trust me, I am, as the person who wrote it, about the timeliness of it, the bigger argument about a cosmopolitan socialist left and using ideas from Fatima Marnisi and Amartya Sen and Adolf Reed, and Cornel West, and looking at the Asian values debate and looking at the African National Congress, I can assure you that this book is the beginning of some other bigger argument about the nature of a non-puritanical, dynamic, cosmopolitan, but also grounded in reality left that we're trying to build. And you'll certainly be hearing more about in future book projects, and also some books we're working on ourselves that we're going to self-publish through TMBS. Now, I will say, and we're going to probably talk more about this in the post-game, there are 3 reviews up on Amazon. I do not recommend that you buy this book on Amazon. I really would prefer you buy it either at Red Emma's, or if you need to, use IndieBound. You can put in your zip code, find any independent booksellers. I am still observing 100% the Amazon boycott in solidarity with Chris Smalls and other great organizers in terms of my, any online purchases like that. But there are 3 reviews, and if you have, gotten it through Amazon, please, spare us a nice 5-star review. But I will say this. This is a review. There are 2 5-star reviews and 1 1-star review, and I'm going to read the 1-star review. This is from somebody named A Serious Reader. Is a fantastic, like a refined gentleman, 2022. A Serious Reader writes, "This book stinks. It's easily the worst book that I've ever encountered." Now, I just want to say, this book is boring. This book has, this book is mediocre. This book is blah. Sure. But if this is the worst book this guy has ever seen in a world with a lot of books,
I'm pretty good.
That's like the Geely effect. Like, don't you want to just order it and see just how bad?
Speaking of bad writing, overusing superlatives, I would say.
Matt, I definitely want your literary hangover on this. First, calling Against the Web a book is downright silly. It's a 96-page pamphlet and spreads out only unsubstantiated ad hominems. Now, I'd say this, yes, it is a short book, and you can read it in an afternoon, and I think that it is fantastic to be. I'm a fan of Zen art. I think economism is a good thing.
Also, that's a tradition in political writing as well.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is also true. I don't want to like overhype myself here, but this wasn't like the people like Orwell weren't just like, I can't do the extra pages. It's like a drunk Chris Matthews. Paying over $8 for the ebook version is essentially theft. Now, I will say this is very lawyerly from a serious reader, because the Kindle price is $8.69. So he got that. That's right. That extra 69 cents is where he really turned the screws in. And then I will say this: the book is not filled. It's not particularly ad hominem. I don't even have that much of a joke about it. I mean, they're there, but it's not. I mean, there isn't even that much Dave Rubin in it. Like I tried to treat this somewhat seriously. Mr. Brooks simply quotes from other original sources and intersperses these lifted ideas with snarky, snide, and foul comments. Now, I like snarky, snide, and foul comments. I could see it as a future podcast episode title, but when you criticize other people's ideas, even if I'm totally failing at it, that's not lifting their ideas. Like when David Griscom says something about he's not like lifting ideas from the Financial Times when he criticizes an editorial. This is a whole other. This is actually this could be a very interesting expansion. I actually could see this reasoning being deployed in 21st century libel laws,
or like a lit.
You just defamed Thomas Friedman by disagreeing with him, and now all of your posts are taken down by the AMA Google Web at the behest of the Foot Locker Corporation. Amazingly, Brooks desires a cosmopolitan response from the left and the new right. Okay. But Brooks does not understand that any cosmopolitan concept is never filled with hate, venom, loathing, and wrath, which are Brooks's only tools. Sadly, I don't know. Hate, loathing. Sadly.
Hate, loathing, and impressions.
Hate, loathing. Yeah, exactly. You ever heard of a fucking knockoff Nelson Mandela impression? That Obama impression is respectable. I mean, I'm sure obviously a lot of hate and loathing goes into, actually, but not even that one. I think that's actually one of the reasons I've been doing less Obama impressions is probably, frankly, because of how pissed I am at him. It's a very fond impression. Sadly, Brooks never even tries to engage the IDW's ideas and refute them with facts, statistics, and truth. This book is that is definitely a tell from a serious reader. This book is a very sad excuse for real scholarship. Do not buy it! Exclamation point. That's the Trump exclamation point. So I would invite you now to go pick up a copy of Against the Web, Cosmopolitan Answer to the New Right. It's actually a very good book. And particularly the concluding chapter on a new type of way of doing internationalism that expands the left project. I'm really excited about, I'm really proud of it, and it's relevant for a blessedly much larger conversation than those guys. And the critiques are really solid too. Lit with a nice base of foul snide comment. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with our first guest. Welcome back to the Michael Book Show. Joining us now is Yolian. I'm totally messing up. Yolian Ogbu. Tell me how that was. Is that okay?
Close.
Matt, Yolian Ogbu. Sorry. She is an organizer with Corona Strike and also Your Workers, My Family, which are planning events for May. We've been trying to, as much as we can, talk to people on this show who are really involved in strike actions. That to me seems like the most important site we have right now in the pandemic after Bernie's out. And you came to our attention first because of this pretty amazing story that we'll put up as a thread about your mom and her coworkers. Can you tell this story? We'll have it up on screen too, but I'd really like you to hear this story. This is definitely one of the top 5 most inspiring things I've seen in the last several weeks.
I love that. I have to tell my mom that for sure.
It's absolutely true.
Yeah. So my mom is a nursing home worker in the Texas area, and she was getting super fed up. She just kind of came to me one day complaining about how she asked her boss for hazard pay after I told her about what that concept was and how other people were asking for it. And her boss literally—
Would you mind, I'm sorry, would you mind explaining hazard pay to people just in case they don't know too? Yeah, please.
No, yeah. It's just like a part of just like being able to pay an employee, at which point like you're working under like your horrible conditions, or just like basically during a pandemic, like, and what you're working in or with like is potentially hazardous. And so the, I guess, argument for why hazard pay would work for nursing home workers is if they literally like feed, bathe, and care for these elderly and immunocompromised residents. And so my mom comes into contact with these people like literally every day and could potentially contract the virus and give it to us, which sucks. So her boss, evidently named Karen, literally like laughed
literally
at her.
True? Okay.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Okay.
And said that they could have free lunch one day, like basically like pizza party style. And she could not believe it. And she was really fed up about it. So I was like, oh my gosh, like you can do something about it. And she's like, are you sure? And so we started like writing anonymous letters to their, to her boss saying like basically threatening that we were going to strike if she doesn't provide hazard pay. Didn't really listen or get any response. So my mom decides to call sick one day. And the rest of her team does the same thing. And just kind of a background information, their entire team and all of the employees at this nursing home are immigrants and or undocumented as well. And so like it was a big risk for them to do that, but they did it, and obviously they won, thank goodness. So that had happened. Her boss was like freaking out. And so she calls her like desperately and asking her to, cover her shift. My mom really did not care. And so after 3 days of the sick out, she gets a call from her regional director asking for her to come back, and said, yeah, we'll give you hazard pay. Just please come back. Like we need to take care of these residents. And the admin staff had no idea how to take care of these people. So yeah.
So that's an awesome story. And I remember seeing that thread and knowing we needed to get you on the show. So can you talk, out of that, how does that relate to Corona strike and your workers, my family?
Right.
These organizing efforts that I think, is it from May 1st?
Yeah, exactly. So it was actually through that story that like went viral in a matter of like hours that I actually got connected to people from Occupy Wall Street who started the Corona Strike Coalition. And so because of that, I got connected to one of their organizers and I joined the Corona Strike team, and they said, this is what's happening. And so I got on these calls and we started realizing like in a matter of a week, we had to figure out how to organize a nationwide strike with like all of these other unions. And it was incredible. And so outside of that, I'm having conversations with peers that are like kind of in the same situation that I was, where like all of our family members are essential workers. And so we just kind of felt helpless. And so to provide like a non-risk supplemental action to like physically striking on Friday, we decided to gather up all of the people that usually are on social media anyways and say, hey, like digitally strike, you have the ability to do it. And so that means tweet bombing at companies, like holding them accountable as much as you can, and calling these people out for what they are. Also supporting and sharing the stories of essential workers too. Because if my mom's story can literally touch millions of people, I think if everyone knew about other people's stories, it would do the same as well.
Yeah. And I think that's really smart, because I think that is, digital can't substitute for physical action, but if you use it to do what it's designed for, which is to get those stories out, then obviously it'd be really effective. So what is happening on Friday? And then how can people help?
Yeah, so Friday, a bunch of like workers are going to be striking, whether it's from Target, Instacart, Whole Foods. So please support these strikers on the front lines. And we're also engaging in a shop out. So don't shop from Amazon or any of these horrible companies that are exploiting their workers. Try your best not to do that. And then the other part of it is use different hashtags, 2 hashtags mainly, hashtag Corona Strike and hashtag Your Workers, My Family, to either share stories of your loved ones working on the front lines, or just like talk about why you're so frustrated at the world right now and why they're not and caring about their frontline workers. And so those are the big things, and make sure to follow like what our social media people are up to and how they're going to continue updating everyone on these actions.
What kind of unions are involved and what are the demands?
Yeah, so like Target Workers United are working a lot of there's a Whole Food Workers Union, and mainly Walmart Workers Union for sure. So they're demanding specifically for hazard pay, paid sick leave for at least up to 2 weeks. Also Amazon, forgot to mention them. And
Always
also, them. No, literally. And PPE, literally at the minimum. These are like basic requirements. It's not like they're asking for like $100K like salary a year. Like these people are working like bottom tier, like slave wages at this point. And literally asking for like dollars more, and they're tired of seeing like appreciation pay or like these cute like hero shirts, which I think are being given as an alternative to actual pay. So that'll be the
giving people hero shirts as an alternative to paying them.
Oh yeah, literally. Like Whole Foods gave all of their workers like a cool like hero shirt, like you're a hero to us, instead of actually compensation, which okay.
And the ways that and some of the things that they're not getting provided could, if you wanted to be selfish about it, threaten you as a receiving end of people's, working in these environments and giving these deliveries, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like these people are forced to work under these conditions for literally like nothing, plus aren't even given masks to do that in the process. It's disgusting.
It's absolutely disgusting. So, okay, so people can support on social media. People can find the resources of places not to participate. Make sure you don't shop at Target, Walmart, Amazon.
Right.
I guess is the kind of final, and take this any direction you want to go, but in a more sort of big picture way. Do you feel like there's been so many conversations and so many debates about like, how can campus activism get connected with real world work? What's the relationship between that and election campaigns and restoring the labor rights movement? And then just watching this campaign take place and how important the story of what your mom did was. I mean, do you think like this is like a model that's coming together now that could actually have big dividends even outside of this crisis? Like it's being designed to last.
Yeah, no, exactly. I completely agree with that. Honestly, like a lot of people I know, and I for sure myself and my family are literally fed up with electoral politics. Like no one's getting anything that they want out of it. I mean, after Bernie dropped out, like we were literally hopeless. So after that, I think people like my mom take things onto with their own hands and decide, what, like grassroots local action is actually going to get the things that I want, not electing some stupid local official that won't do anything for me. So I think it's pivoting away from like this one action of just voting and saying, what, if you build your community and build a strong community around you and decide to organize around that, like you're going to get a lot more out of it. So I think this crisis, as much as it's horrible, has also, I think, waking up people, I guess, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's the right thing, but like it's caused people to like realize that like the ballot box is not going to save them. And so after I think all this is going to happen, I hope that a lot of the agitation people are like having right now is going to last. And so that's why starting this campaign, along with partnering with like the National Children's Campaign, to like pivot this to be like, listen, like if you don't take care of your workers, you are literally going to kill off the next generation, because you're not allowing these people to pay, like, provide for their children. And like making those connections and making it so stark is what I think really going to bring people in. And so I think it's people like my mom and creating an intersectional movement of those that are most marginalized at the forefront of this movement, like my mother, is what's going to make this movement last even past the election. Because regardless of what's going to happen, if we build strong communities, elections, the president won't freaking matter.
Well, keep going. It's awesome that you're doing it. Thanks for taking some time with us. I'm going to try one more time, and I'm going to preemptively apologize.
Okay.
Yolian Ogbu.
Close. Yolian Ogbu.
Yolian Ogbu. All right. That's who you find. She said it right. I did not. I apologize. But there's all the links that you can find, your Twitter and various ways that you can support this strike on May 1st, which is really important. So thanks so much for talking with us about it.
Thank you. All right.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, guys. I like that. That was you could tell generational differences on Zoom. Everybody else, all of the boomers, X, and even millennials, older millennials, sit on for a while after a segment's over. And Zoomers,
that is
done.
true.
Done. Thank you. Bye.
You're hovering over it.
Yeah. It was like, wait, if I close that, does it shut down the whole stream?
It's the digital equivalent to like saying goodbye and then realizing you have to walk down the block on the same sidewalk for a while.
That's
I
true.
feel like if anybody would hate that, it would be you, Matt.
Oh yeah, I'm like, I want to listen to my podcast or my audio.
Right.
Oh man.
Sick of these guys.
Yeah, I'm actually like that too. It's funny because I do like being social and I can, whatever, but as soon as I'm done, I can't. Like I hate the double dip when you think like everything like.
Well, because you've entered a transitional phase and now you have to like exit again. It's like you're not
abruptly.
You want to clean, it's like NASA or something.
But you just can't be passive. I mean, that's the thing that drives me nuts. It's like you have to be assertive and make a choice, or live with the consequences.
That's also true.
Which means 2 more minutes of me yapping your ear off.
David's like, hey man, you didn't fucking move, so I'm going to talk to you about.
We ought to do
a series. Yeah, we ought to do a series about Johnny Cash, and because there was actually they're at the Palladium. That was an old bar down there, and there was a guy who actually, he was reading Mao, and Johnny said, "Hey, you want to come backstage with me?" And they might have gotten drunk, but they might have also been sharing ideas of the mind. All right. We have a few minutes before Judah. You want to do the gem?
Yeah, we could definitely do it.
Let's gem it, and then we'll be back with Judah Freidlander.
I mean, we just got to recognize the unprecedented situation that we're in. And I know, we're starting to get used to this new reality in a sense. Not that it's something that we want, but, a lot of folks are starting to accept the kind of depraved scenario that we're in right now. And that's a very dangerous thing. There was a pretty striking study that came out from the Urban Institute, which is a good thing, lefty think tank, about how this virus and how the pandemic has been affecting different people. So 41.5% of families have now said that they've either lost jobs, work hours, or that their work income has actually reduced since this pandemic has started. So obviously that's a massive amount of the population that's being affected by the coronavirus, but then by the economic crisis that follows it. 30.6% of adults report that their families reduced spending on food. 43.1% put off major purchases, and 27.9% drew down savings or increased credit card debt. Right, so people are hurting. We're seeing this contraction in consumer spending in the economy. And lastly, I want to add nearly 1/3 of adults, 31%, reported that their families could not pay the rent, mortgage, or utilities, that they were food insecure or went without medical care because of the cost during the last 30 days. So add that to the reality that, the new estimates are coming out that around 16% of Americans will be unemployed by the end of the month. Something like 26 million or so people have filed for unemployment. American people are really hurting, and we're coming up to a massive expense in everyone's calendar, which is rent. We've talked in the past about how a vast majority of Americans, are living just on one paycheck. Most people are already rent burdened. In this context, when you're seeing such a contraction for most people's incomes and their spending habits, their ability to go to work, people can't make this rent payment that's coming up. And the response that we've seen from the federal government has been completely incompetent at reaching this reality. So look, it's great that we've put in these these moratoriums on evictions, right? Because there's nothing more despicable that you could imagine than throwing people onto the street in a situation like this. But that doesn't go nearly far enough. when you're talking about so many people who have seen their income drastically disappear, people aren't secure in the future. So people who even have jobs or work right now aren't guaranteed that they're going to be able to come back into the economy at the same level. So people who already have rent burdens now might find themselves in a position where their income has drastically stopped, where half of the family unit that was working is no longer working. So this is a massive shift that we're seeing in our spending habits and in the U.S. economy. And I wanted to hit on this because there are people who aren't going to be able to pay their rent, and it's very important that folks recognize that the only way that we're going to be able to survive this, if we don't have the government coming in and dealing with this rent burden, is if we're organizing together. So there's a lot of people who just aren't going to be able to pay their rent on May 1st, right? What's going to be much more powerful is if you see folks who are rent striking together, right? Because by standing together with one another, we prevent the burdens of this from falling on one or two individuals. So there's in New York, there are organizations that are trying to organize a rent strike. There are people like AOC who have been trying to lobby, for example, Cuomo, to put a moratorium on rent payments, not just on evictions, on rent payments. And these are the kind of laudable goals. So definitely, check out your area and try to get involved with these organizations because this is this is the only way that we're going to get out of this if we join together to fight this. But I wanted to hit just fundamentally where this shows the contradictions and the fundamental problems with capitalism, right? Because any rational society would recognize that, the housing stock hasn't changed, right? We have people who are housed right now, and our first priority should be finding people who are unhoused and housing them. But what are we having to do in this backward system that we're living in? We're actually trying to make sure that the people who are already in their houses are going to be able to stay in those houses, and they're not going to be forced out by the state on behalf of landlords, right? That is a completely backward system, especially in a pandemic system, and it was backwards before. Capitalism flips our understanding of the material world around us, right? Which is, you need shelter, here are shelters, let's get people inside of those. It turns those material needs into power relations. So now we have a class of people who makes their profit off of rents. Basically, they're going to take a portion of your income from now going forward, just so that you can have your basic human needs met. And they're not even improving the housing, they're just maintaining it on the most basic level, and in most cases not at all, right? So capitalism creates this fundamental contradiction between the use value that we have because it wants to maintain the exchange value that we have. And you see where this tension is really hit when you see the two different sides of the economic recovery that we've had, right? How inadequate has the response been when it comes to making sure that people can make their daily expenses, that people have income coming to them, that people have access to healthcare, right? Which we still have not come with anything close to a reasonable solution for that. Nothing. And then you look at what the Federal Reserve has done. The Federal Reserve has moved with unprecedented speed since the beginning of this crisis to prop up the asset prices and the corporations who have spent the past 10 years loading up on debt, right? Because the Federal Reserve made money really cheap so that they were able to do that. And now that there's this kind of contraction in the market, the Federal Reserve just pumped literally trillions of dollars into buying that bad debt to make sure that these too big to fail organizations don't collapse. I'm not necessarily saying that, the Federal Reserve shouldn't be involved in making sure that the entire economy doesn't collapse. But what I am saying is it's very interesting how the one side of our government that's the least democratic responsive, right, which is the Federal Reserve, is so quick to act. And it serves a very small group of people, but those are the people with the money and the power. And then you see this other half of society, not even half, like 99% of society, desperately needing a solution to this crisis and not receiving it, even when we have the materials, right? We have the housing stock to make sure that people are maintained and that they don't have to deal with this fear. But because of the economic system that we're living in, right? A man-made, a human-made system. We're going to try to preserve that system over taking care of people's basic needs, right? So that's the big, zoom out picture. Like, these are the fundamental problems with capitalism. The practical things that we can do right now is to try to organize together in solidarity. I highly suggest trying to find and joining your tenant unions. If you're able to, get engaged in some of these plans to, coordinate a strike, with your rent. I mean, this is the kind of politics that we need to be seeing, with the conviction of looking out for one another, and two, with the longer term view of recognizing that this system is not natural, that it is a human-made creation, and that it serves the interests of a few to the detriment of the many.
Yeah, I agree. I want to point out one thing, which is the math, the sort of numerator and denominator, I think, really drives this home to people, which is that the $2 trillion stimulus, if you divide that by 130 million workers in America, that's about $15,000 per worker. And we're all getting $1,200 from that thing. So where's the rest of that money going? That's going for basically an economic project into the future, basically.
An economic project, and also to like literally maintain. I mean, like, I don't think people realize how ridiculous what's happened over the past 10 years has been with corporations, basically, padding whatever small profits that they were making by hawking up large amounts of debt, because all they had to show is that there was some growth to be able basically to take up a lot of debt, with the understanding, which they learned in 2009 and which we're experiencing again, that the government will come in and bail you out. Now, you want to talk about systems that are inefficient. That's an inefficient system. You look at what's been going on when we start to look at the balance sheets of organizations like WeWork, and you see the waste and the fat that literally now we're spending, trillions of dollars to maintain. It starts to become very ridiculous, especially when you realize that we have the capacity to be doing basically what would be the bare minimum. And there is it's not even political in the sense that like the people don't want it. It's that the political institutions don't want it. That's why Republicans are freaking out that all these people who are making, the kind of paltry unemployment checks, all these people are making more than they typically would in a month, and they're not going to go back to work. Well, those people shouldn't go back to work for poverty wages, right? So the thing is that we have the capacity to meet people's needs, and our system is actually what's preventing those needs being met, because it has to mediate and create a power relationship for the few people to just like really lord over everybody. And, it's just, I guess it's because I've had time to think about this since we've been, so sort of holed up. But when you realize the sluggishness that we have as a community and as a people, it's despicable, and it's really evil at this point. When you're seeing that people are saying that they're not buying food, people are not going to the doctor when they need to go to the doctor, and literally a medical pandemic, so that we can maintain the profits of a few small people, that the government won't step in and say, hey, for 2 months, we're going to put a moratorium on rent payments. And, if we need to come up with a compromise where the government matches or comes up with that money for people, then, that's the conversation we should be having. This kind of, preventing of evictions is not even the bare minimum. I mean, it would be inhumane to be pursuing evictions at the moment.
All right, folks, I think we're going to head to...
Oh, you're muted, Matt. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I think we're going to run to a quick break here and try to get Judah and Michael on the line. So cool. We'll be right back after this.
Live?
Yeah.
All right. Welcome. I'm Michael Brooks. Sorry about that, guys. The computer just totally died. Or not the computer, the internet.
Man.
The pleasure to welcome Judah Freidlander. He's a stand-up comedian. He's been performing since 1989 and has a 2017 special, which he produced himself on American exceptionalism, called America is the Greatest Country in the United States, which is honestly is one of the first, we have some clips of it. It's one of the first stand-up specials. I've watched you, Bill Burr, and Chappelle recently. I can't sit through most specials recently. I really liked watching it.
Thanks, man.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't even know if I was on or not, so I was like,
"Oh, you're here."
Talking, so I figured I'd say something. Thanks. Yeah, well, comedy as a business over the years has gotten, much like the country, has gotten more and more corporate.
Right.
And it's so a lot of the comedy that gets put on major platforms isn't quality, and it's certainly either is avoiding a certain human rights political spectrum or is trying to fit into an acceptable version of that for the mainstream media, in the same way that news is done on mainstream media, where, even on TV talk shows and stuff, you'll see a lot of, ripping on the president, but once in a while they'll dip into real issues with both parties, but usually it's obvious criticisms of a terrible federal government that's in office right now, and but not seeing the bigger picture,
right?
Because I think so many people, they're raised to think, and if you look at Hollywood, most Hollywood movies are good guys and bad guys. And I think, there's still so many people in the country who view the political world as good guys and bad guys. But, as you and I, many of the people, I'm of the thing where it's usually there's a group of bad guys and another set of bad guys, instead of one being good and bad. And I think that's one way the Republicans and the Democrats, like, one of the ways they work together is, if there's two parties and it's always one party that's to blame, people are never going to think there's actually another reason why things are messed up. They work together that way.
We've been talking a lot about, and I think Matt first put it this way, but that so many, at least when we're talking about Republicans and Democrats, which we don't necessarily talk, relatively speaking, for a politics show, we don't talk about that stuff a lot, but obviously we do a fair amount. But that one party is a party of bosses and the other party is a party of managers.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like the way you can, and even like the way, like this whole thing of Trump telling people to drink disinfectants or whatever. And then, he was being sarcastic, which is funny, but that, like, okay, he shouldn't say that. Sure. Whatever. But then that, like, the be all end all of a certain kind.
Oh man.
That's government censorship, right?
That is the government coming.
That's bipartisan government censorship. Michael Brooks on his show.
Yeah.
Here.
I think, Judah, I think I can finish the gist of his question while we
But I tell you, as far as I don't know if his freeze frame is still on there. If your internet's going to go out and freeze frame, that's like a perfect pose.
Yeah, it is.
It really is.
I mean, that's stylish. Some people have internet, connection problems, and they just have no personal flair to it. And this is quality freeze frame.
Yeah, we lost Michael again. I think what he was going to say is it becomes a thing where people can blame the theoretical dumb guy. Like, don't drink Clorox, you idiots, right? Instead of, I don't know. Do you have any response to that?
It's been going on for decades,
right.
I mean, even with George Bush, people would do jokes about how dumb he is. But that's dangerous because then you're missing, the evil and the horrendous and dangerous platforms that they're intentionally doing. So and the same with this current administration. So it's.
But Trump really riles them up too. I mean, it's funny how specifically like the kind of people who were always the first person to raise their hand in class. Donald Trump succeeding and being the president of the United States really riles them up. So they feel like they need to correct him constantly, and he just doesn't care. It's not going to move too much, especially I don't know. Like this disinfectant thing was a great example of that. I mean, it's just completely ludicrous, obviously, that the president of the United States right now is talking about people injecting disinfectant to defeat corona.
Well, I mean, it's his thought process is in the right direction. That's one of the way medicines work. You put something in a body that's going to kill the disease, but you can't have it kill the entire host.
Yeah.
So it's really, grade school, kindergarten level thinking. It's you're getting one small portion of the thought process, but not the full thing. But if you just criticize statements like that, which is important to do, but if you don't criticize the bigger picture of things and the bigger corruption of things, you're letting more problems happen. And the greed and power of capitalism is a big part of so many problems with what's going on.
Oh yeah.
And so if you're just critiquing the obvious dumb statements, then you're missing the bigger picture of why we're where we're at. The fact that I think the U.S. is 4% of the population, and we have over 20% of the the COVID deaths. That's our initial response was too late and not effective enough, and now so much of the government's already discussing about opening things up, and now we're too early. So it's like the government's doing things wrong everywhere.
Well, to that,
I was just reading some news from Hong Kong, and they've had 3 days in a row of no new cases, and now they're starting to talk about, okay, how should we maybe open things up? We're still getting thousands of deaths a day, and we're like, yeah, let's talk about opening it up. It's like, you got to control it first and get rid of it first.
And to your point about the broader picture, we can talk about Trump's late response, but also Cuomo just said he wishes the media blew their trumpets a bit earlier on the coronavirus, as if it's their job to let him know that he should be prepared. And that's the thing. If you just act like Trump is a bad guy, you might think.
Well, again, I'll say he's partially right there. It's like,
right.
It was interesting how you're watching, TV news and hardly anyone's even mentioning it. I remember February 26th, I texted a comedian friend of mine from Rome, who lives in Rome and does comedy in Rome, Luca Zezzi. And he, because that was when Italy went into lockdown, like half the country went into lockdown. And I texted him and I was like, hey, one, are you okay? And what's going on? And what do you think about what's going on? And immediately he said, yes, things have to be locked down. That's the only way to stop it at this point. And then the next week I texted a filmmaker friend of mine who lives in Seoul in South Korea, and she's from there. And she said the exact same thing. And then I was like, okay, these people have more information than we currently have and are further ahead on the timeline. And it's going to be happening here, and it probably already should be happening here. So, yeah, I don't know. I think there's a couple reasons. There's many reasons why we were late, including, the Republican Party getting rid of pandemic teams and just being anti-science in general. But I think there's also just America as a country. You have to look at so much of, and Europe also, just Western arrogance, American arrogance, and racism. Where initially it's like, oh, that's in China. Well, there's so much of America's like, well, those crazy Chinese, that's not here. They're always getting diseases. We don't, and then it happens in Italy and they're like, oh, those crazy Italians, why can't they get it together? The rest of Europe doesn't have a problem.
And then it was those crazy Yankees.
That's not the full picture, but I think both those things, the arrogance and the bigotries, come into play.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's your stand-up special. I'll try to get a minute whack in here before I go back offline again.
Welcome back. Welcome back to your own show.
Thanks, man. David
I think it's good. I think hosts should take more breaks during their own shows.
Dude, I got to tell you, I am not mad at this new schedule at all.
Yeah.
Can you guys take care of it? I'm going to go make some tea. But I was thinking about that though. Can we play? Well, we have some clips. We have the Corona vaccine clip, but we also have the trailer for the 2017 special. And I was thinking about that, like America number one mindset.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I got to tell you, I feel like in some of the circles we're in, we actually have to do a job where it's nowhere big a problem as America number one, but we actually have to do like a corrective with, you know, America always evil, America the worst thing ever, you know, versus like America like everywhere else, pretty fucking complicated.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, and that's one of the reasons, you know, I love Cornel West so much. Like, this is an empire from its inception, but it's also this valiant democratic effort at the same time. And we're actually in the middle of that battle. That's a much more inspiring, dynamic way of looking at where we're at. But you really do get that, like when you go across the crowd and where anybody could say, it does not matter where they are from, you do have that American, like, I know very little. I probably have a little piece of folk wisdom about where you're from, and I'm just going to extrapolate.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm satirizing. I mean,
no, it's awesome. It's hilarious.
You know, I first started touring overseas about 10 years ago. And I remember and I've always been interested in, you know, human rights and internationally how things are different in different cultures and different places. But when I started traveling overseas and doing shows, it really opened things up to me. And it really opened things up to me about the general American identity of this idea that we're number one. And many other countries don't have that. Some do, but many don't. Like when I've done shows in England, I never got that vibe. I always got the feeling England is just waiting for the disappointment to happen. They don't know when it's going to happen, but they're just waiting. Even when it comes to sports, you know, soccer, football, they know they're going to get their hearts broken. When it's going to happen. And when we're like, we're just the best, you know, and if we're not good at a certain sport, that sport sucks, you know, or that sport's for foreigners. That's the basic general I mean, it's getting better in this country, obviously, but that's the way it's been for so long. But so I try to learn as much as I can when I, you know, not just when I'm home in the U.S., but when I go to other places within the U.S. and when I go overseas. So I really try to learn a lot about the other places, because it's, when you learn more about other places, you're also learning more about your own place, you know.
I have to say, I mean, well, I'll give you something that I thought was kind of funny, and then I'll ask. I'm sure you've been asked this question a million times, but it does interest me. So fuck it, I'll ask it again.
Yeah.
What is it like? I mean, what isn't? I mean, England makes sense, but I mean, have you done stand up in Asia or Africa or Latin America? What does it? How does it track depending on where you're at?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. A lot of international audiences, I find a lot of them like my act a lot, and it's because I think sometimes I see America, you know, more from an outsider perspective and not just buying all the propaganda. So, and I also, you know, I try to learn as much as I can about their country, so they appreciate that. Even when I'm doing shows in New York, you know, the audiences in New York for the most part are it's mostly people from other places in this country and throughout the world. And no, I haven't done. I was lining up shows in Asia several years ago, and then I wasn't able to do it. Same with Australia. They messed up the promoter messed up my work visa, so the shows had to.
That's what they're like there.
And then I was just going to be booking shows in Mexico, and I was going to be doing shows this year in Argentina and maybe Chile, but I've had to, you know, postpone everything. But I've done. I don't know. I've done 5 cities in Sweden. I've done a couple cities in Norway, Scotland, Ireland, Romania, Portugal, 3 cities in Italy. I'm forgetting other countries, but I try to get out there as much as I can. Because I first of all, it's challenging going to other countries when English isn't someone's first language. And I also learn and grow as a performer and a person. I think traveling is very important. And I like doing the regular things. I don't do a lot of the tourist stuff. I like to get on their subways, get on their buses, go to the grocery store, go to the pharmacy, and just see like what everyday life is, and then talk to people. Yeah. When I was in Romania, I learned a lot there. You know, I mean, that's a country, from the people I talk to, have almost no hope in government. I mean, they've been screwed over so much for so long by so many different, parties that they almost have no hope, but it was interesting. I was trying to find a laundromat there because I was there for a couple of weeks and I was trying to wash my clothes, and I found one, and it was run by 2 college students, and there's no one in there. It was all done through an app on your phone that opens the door for you, and then the machines were all done by the app. It was like from the future. It was like nice, and it was better than any laundromat I've ever been to in the U.S. And so I was like, wow, it's like, this is a country that they don't have any highways. They have a lot of problems, and great country, love it, but the government, they've had a lot of corruption.
What ranking are they in Europe?
Pretty high in my book.
Yeah. Okay. I want to play the ad in a second.
They're like the Bronx of Europe.
That's high.
We're talking power, we're talking passion, and amazing food. I had one of the best cheeseburgers I've ever had in my life there. It was
that makes sense. I believe, the place that I need to go to many more places, but the place that I've been to that actually has the closest to like in America, we're number one, and also like we're always number one, and things that actually everybody would probably get, you can't get because we are the only ones who get it. The closest, and I studied in this place, is Turkey. Oh, there really is like amazing. Like I remember one time I was joking with somebody about this, like listening to this. We were talking with this Turkish person about Ataturk, and absolutely, like Ataturk is actually, I wonder now what it would be like 10 years later as things have kind of accelerated in some changes there. But yes, Ataturk's a super big deal, no doubt. But she just kept saying, like, she's like, it's like a guy who found a country, and we love him and we respect him, but we also look at him as a founding father. You wouldn't understand that. And we're sitting there like, like we fucking republish books about the same like handful of men like every year. Yeah. And it's like the new Airport Lounge bestseller is like how John Adams like was the best lovemaker in the colonial era or whatever. And just with the most like sincere, not like, I understand you have those people, but this is how it's different. Or yes, but that's a couple hundred years ago and this is more modern. Just like you just can't get it. And we're sitting there like, you pick like the closest one-to-one that we could possibly get.
Right. But yeah, no, it's interesting because, both of the main parties have their own propaganda, but often they have the same propaganda. And that was like I used to do a bit on it. I might start doing it again, where I used to talk about, like from the time we're little kids in this country, we're taught that we're the best. Yep. Not the best country, but the best in the history of the world. That's you hear it on the mainstream media, you hear it from both political parties, and then when we're having an election, they would always say, "This is very important. We're electing the leader of the free world." And I always wondered, like, how come we're the only country that gets to vote for the leader of the free world? And it must be because we're number one. I mean, the other countries obviously just haven't done well enough to deserve the right to vote for the leader of the free world. So,
Romania.
Yeah, Romania, Sweden, they really got to step it up if they want to vote for the leader, So that thing that, there's all different types of propaganda, and you can make the argument that everything is propaganda, but so that thematically in my stand-up act, I'm sad, through jokes, through a lot of one-liners, through crowd work, I satirize, the myth of American exceptionalism, and basically as a nation, and how our government oppresses us, and how we respond to all the human rights issues, So I don't always refer to that as political. You can if you want, but because I don't talk about, oh, what did this politician say and how's that going to affect them in their ratings or whatever. I just
that always struck me as weird. I want to play an ad from some of your special in a second, but like that you would hear political comedians were either the greats, like they said, Richard Pryor or something, like, yes, because politics is about all of the big things that we deal with and people are satirizing it. Or it's like, that's the guy on PBS who does that, that really, he just nailed the Trent Lott impression.
Right.
But it's all political comedy. Like there's it's just like, yeah, those are just the people that talk about that shit, man.
Right. I mean, when I first started, I was 19 when I started doing stand-up.
Oh, wow.
And when I first started, I did do some political jokes, but they were at the time, more like your TV monologue jokes, where they were just kind of superficial. And then for years, I stopped doing them because I'm like, well, there's an expiration date on all those jokes, But then when I started really satirizing and dealing with, big human rights issues, unfortunately, most of that stuff does not have an expiration date on it. If I'm doing a bit about human rights to healthcare in this country, unfortunately, that would be great if those jokes had an expiration date because we've progressed on healthcare, but we haven't. So they're currently timeless.
Bernie was trying to kill your set, but he couldn't do it.
I actually thought of that for a second. I'm like, come on. And the whole country really leans, in a more socialist direction. That's going to, but it's, those are, I get all kinds of thoughts in my head, but it's, it's just, I know so many people are upset and, critical of his campaign and stuff like that, but, trying to do what he did, trying to do what people are doing, it's one of the hardest things there is, and so I just want to, I'm no expert, but I just want to say to people, it's like, don't give up, because it's, governments look at history, look at the history of the world. How often, what percentage of the time has any country or any part of the world had governments that were really there helping people? It's one of the hardest things to do. So it's, I'm sure there were mistakes made and stuff like that. Like I said, I'm not a political expert, but it's one of the hardest fucking things to do is to overtake oppression. So,
right.
You got to just, keep fighting, so. I don't know.
No, that's exactly what Cornel West said to us last week.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. He said, it's fucking hard and you got to go for it.
Yeah. I mean,
that was the verbatim quote.
That's so cool you had him on the show. I'm a huge fan of his. I remember the first time, I would see him on TV and stuff, but I didn't read one of his books until, I don't know, it's probably like 8 or 9 years ago. I read Hope on a Tightrope, and I was just like, it's a short little book, but it's like, man, it's just, there's just so much great stuff in it. He's great.
He's amazing. No, it was an honor. Let's play a couple of clips.
We have this billionaire clip that we wanted to do.
Yeah. We have billionaire and we have the vaccine, and we also have like a little bit of a trailer for this special.
All right.
So this set, I'll just play it. So this set here is
recent.
Yeah, this is from, what was this from? March 8th, I believe.
Yep, March 8th.
This is like a new joke night. So
this is 2020 in the pit. Basically, this is a corona vector right here.
Yeah, the last show I did before I decided to stop doing shows was on March 10th. I should have stopped a week earlier, 2 weeks earlier. But so this was a new joke night that this comic Nat Towson runs at the Pit in New York City. So the joke I've been doing it for a little while, but still tinkering with it. And then the second half of it was pretty much brand new, just kind of done that night. So that bit's not fully developed yet, but here it is.
All right, let's check it out.
Now, some people say we should live in a society where billionaires do not exist. There should be no billionaires. We should economically be structured in a way so that billionaires can exist. Do you agree on that? I agree. There should be no billionaires. Should be one trillionaire, everyone else no money. Monarchies, feudalism, it worked for millennia. Yeah, all these people shitting on billionaires. I mean, if you can't trust billionaires, who can you trust? Cops, you know? The most trustworthy person, theoretically, a billionaire cop. You know they're honest. They've never done anything wrong at all. I tell you, you guys have got to vote blue. That's right, for cops. Blue lives matter. Blue lives matter. Vote blue no matter who. Yeah.
So that was that vote blue bit that I was doing, you know, for cops. That was one that I think I had just done it that night, and I was just starting to develop that one. So everything's on hold right now. I haven't done any internet stand-up shows.
Is that a thing? I mean, could you, especially with you, man, because you really do, like, it was actually, I was thinking about this because some comics, like, you know, they just sort of, they work with the crowd, but they obviously do their thing. Last week or a couple weeks ago, we played a vintage clip of Dave Rubin, and literally asking the crowd questions was what he did. I guess he could do this. I mean, look, you could ask people if they're gay on Zoom too, I guess, but you really you seriously interact with them. So yeah. How would you do that? I mean,
well, you know, in my act, like I said, you know, I've been doing this, I don't know what, a little over 30 years, I guess. And I always did a lot of one-liners, a lot of jokes. I always did a lot of crowd work. And over the years, and, you know, and my persona, I mean, I was a young kid when I started, and I was a young 19. So the persona has obviously changed over the years, and it continues to develop. But you know, I started doing crowd work in a different way, because I would always I remember like probably 20 some years ago, I would be seeing comics and everyone was always trying to bond with the audience. You know, like, if you had this experience I've had, don't you hate that kind of stuff? And I was like, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to act like I can't relate to one fucking thing the crowd is saying, and just act like I'm so much better than them, and they're just fucking worthless people. What are they doing here? And just go the total opposite way. So, right. So what I was doing was like also satirizing narcissism. And I was initially doing it an individual level, you know, the bragging person, the self-absorbed person. And then around, I don't know, 10, 12 so years ago, I started satirizing the nation as that way. So I've always done a lot of crowd work, and sometimes my crowd work, I'm kind of satirizing crowd work, you know, and I do a mix of putting down the crowd and complimenting them at the same time, or I'm really putting me down, or putting, you know, the country down, and, you know, so I try to, and then I try to also just really just listen to the audience. And,
well, that's what I noticed. You
know, really listen,
right,
and really try to go places and really analyze the minutia of everything they're saying. And so it's, you know, my favorite is when I take things in a direction I have no idea where it's going to go, and you really create something right on the spot. Yeah, my special, there's one bit in there that just happened that night where I was talking to someone from the audience, and they said there's some kind of PR person. I can't remember exactly what it was. And I said, who do you do? They do Twitter for a company. I'm like, who do you do Twitter for? And she said, Bud Light. And I was like,
that's a New York show.
You know, like because everyone's going on Twitter whenever something big happens to this country, and they want to get Bud Light's perspective on it. And then I just kind of like went in a direction, and like things like that. It's like, I don't expect it. I don't know where it's going to go. And it's great when it can just keep going and going and really expand. Well,
I thought of two, and then let's play the ad for that special. Yeah. But two that I liked was I thought, and again, especially maybe just because I've heard, and it's no knock on people with these jobs. I mean, these are some of the only jobs that still exist. But somebody in the audience said, "Well, I'm an event organizer," and you just were like, "Oh, so you're a terrorist?"
All right, terrorist.
Yeah, you organize events. And then the second one was some guy from Israel, and it was really funny phrasing. He's like, no, I'm from here. I'm Israel. And you're in Manhattan.
That was a bit I did over 2 nights. That
was great.
Together there. So initially, someone, I'm asking the crowd, "Where are you from?" And oh God, exactly. I'm blanking on how it went there. The guy said he's from Israel, and then I said, "Oh, what part of Palestine are you from?" And then that got like a huge
that was good.
Laugh and created a shitload of tension in the room as well.
Right.
And then another guy was saying, I asked him, where are you from? And he said, Israel. I'm like, we're in Israel, Tel Aviv. And he's like, right here, Tel Aviv. And I'm like, this is New York we're in. This is not Tel Aviv. And I'm like, see, that's why there's problems. Wherever you go, you think it's yours. But so that was, that's something that happened that night, So
I really like that.
For me, stand-up is certainly the way I do it, it's a mix of a monologue and a dialogue. It's not, because stand-up is live performance. So to me, some comics have joke 1, and then they got, bit 50, and then that's the end of their show. And it's the same every night. I tend to always go into a show with an arsenal of material and always new stuff I'm working on. I don't know what order I'm going to do it in. And I also talk with the crowd a lot, and sometimes just talking with them will lead me to a bit that I've already done, and then sometimes it'll lead me like I do a lot of writing off stage and on stage. So when I have a bit on, let's say I have a bit on healthcare, and someone because I kind of run like a mock town hall. I tell people I might have to be president someday. Ask me any questions, and then so someone might yell out healthcare. And that's going to be a question people yell a lot. So the first time someone yells it out, I'll come up with a joke on the spot. And if it does really well, the next time I do a show, if someone yells that out, I'll do that bit again. And then I'll try to think of another bit and build on it. So a bit that started out as a 5-second or a 10-second bit, after a few weeks, a few months, might be a 2 or 4 minute long bit. So just kind of build like that. So I do. Not everyone does writing on stage. They really it's more of a pre-written thing, and mine's never been that way. So, but like I said, everyone works differently.
Hearing you talk about
and yours is better. I'm sorry, Matt. Go ahead. I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah.
Hearing you talk about that way, you kind of just like to let things go and you don't know exactly where they're going to lead to. It seems like comedy is sort of like a process for interpreting reality almost. Like I think of what I like in comedy, it's like a tour through, like I like comedians that will deal with certain subjects in a humorous way that I'm familiar with and sort of lead different paths through it in a certain way. And I mean, and that's sort of the way we use comedy on this show too, right? Like Michael will take like an avatar for some voice, and then we see what that character would do through this reality, and it cuts like a different line.
Yeah. I mean, you're often exploring different things, and when you're creating things, it's a lot of it is just taking a risk and using your brain and your heart and your gut and seeing where things are going. And generally, the more you do it, the better you get at it. I mean, theoretically, that should be how it works. Comedy is one of those things where, or even philosophizing. If you keep using your brain, you should theoretically improve. Instead of just being stuck at a certain level.
Let's play the ad for the special.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to do, and this is great. This is in 2017.
Right.
Well, they say love wins. I think hate has a pretty strong track record. I'm against North Korea using nuclear weapons because that is cultural appropriation in the United States. That is not okay. We live in an oligarchy, but with humidity, it feels like a dictatorship. I think I'm gonna have to be the next president. Any questions about my presidential platform for 2017? Over here? Yeah. Healthcare? We don't need it. We're Americans. We're strong. Europeans need it because they're genetically inferior and they have no contact.
Climate change.
I am for climate change. I don't want the same weather every day. That's fascism. When I'm president, I'm not even going to have a first lady because I think ranking women is sexist. Racism, where do you stand? For or against it? A lot of undecided. Racism, big problem, but we're still #1 at it. Any other questions about my presidential platform? Any other issues?
Gun control.
I think if Jesus had been American and had a gun, he'd still be alive today. They try to nail him to the cross, he'd be like, "Not so fast, you pieces of shit." Jesus, America, victory.
You know what I like about that too is I like the literalism of it, because that's one of the most annoying tendencies in the world today, like across the board, whether it's obviously everybody always goes at religious fundamentalists, but also like the new atheist people, just that trope of like, well, I mean, climate change, of course. Like I like the logic of like, let's look at things in an absolutely literalist, linear way and just go with it and be as dense about it as possible.
Right.
Of course I want the weather to change. What's wrong with you? Like,
Yeah.
You ask me a question, I'm giving it to you straight.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like, it's almost like sometimes it's almost like can almost be like a conspiracy theory in a sense, where it's like, you come up with some solution that might be completely wrong, but mathematically, like everything like links up.
Yes.
Even though theoretically it shouldn't. So and then you create, well, then this is factual.
Yes.
So jokes are sometimes, it's almost like they're like math sometimes, or pieces of a puzzle where you're making all these things link that really shouldn't be linking at all. So I was just so that special, I made that without any deal in place. I made it completely myself. A lot of it was filmed just by me with putting little cameras in the rooms, and I did hire some people to do camera work sometimes too. And then so I completely made it myself. And then my agent at the time, I haven't had an agent in at least a few years. We shopped it around, and it took a long time, but Netflix finally said yes to it. And then so I own it, and then it's technically licensed to Netflix. Now, most of the vast majority of the time, their specials are not made that way. It's they make it,
right,
and they pick you, and then they produce it, and then they put it out. And I, like years ago, I turned down a Netflix special. It was one where like they were going to be producing it, and I turned down some specials from Comedy Central years ago, and there was always some creative. I always felt there were going to be creative censorship things, and there was always legal censorship, legal things I didn't like, where they would not only own that performance, they would own everything you wrote in that performance. And I'm
that's a crazy fucking.
Yeah, and I'm like, you can't own my words and what I wrote.
That's incredible.
I would just turn them down. And with Comedy Central years ago, there were always like, there was always censorship with, and a lot of times it was unwritten, but it's there, where it could be, certain issues or
probably the Tel Aviv jokes.
Oh, that would not fly.
Fly.
I was shocked that stuff got through. And I know if I pitched this to Netflix, it never would have been approved.
Right.
It never would have been approved. And since then, I probably have a couple hours of new material since I put out that last stand-up movie. And I've emailed Netflix, never returned my emails,
Wow.
And one time a friend of mine, a comic, he emailed me to see if they might be interested. And I'm like, I doubt it. They haven't returned my emails, but I'll email them. So I emailed the contact I have there. And they emailed me back immediately and said, no, we're not interested in his, and we're not going to watch it. And then I emailed them back, and I'm like, well, just to remind you, about 6 months ago, I sent you an email saying I'm ready to do another one. I want to see if you're interested. Never heard back from them. So it's just like, showbiz in general, it's sort of a myth that Hollywood is left wing.
Right.
And both sides use it to their own advantage. The Republicans and the right wing will say, oh, they're just a bunch of loony hippies out there. They're out of touch, etc. And then Hollywood will say, yes, we're liberal and progressive, and we're such great equality loving people and just treat everyone perfect. And they're full of shit on that. It's fake news from both directions. Because they're really, most of Hollywood, Hollywood's owned by some of the biggest corporations in the world.
And one of America's biggest exports globally.
Yeah, exactly.
Major business.
Yeah, it's
major.
Still. Yeah.
And you're not going to have Pentagon advisors on your stand-up special.
No. So it's just like, I really, the past, the more I do things, the more I just feel getting like pushed to the fringes of the business. And
so what does that mean? Like, are you like basically now you're doing like what we do? Like, does that mean like, okay, having, not a Patreon page. I never pray that.
Well, I need to learn about that stuff because now there's no live performing, there's
right.
Venues aren't open. I don't know when they're going to be safe to go to, before things got shut down in New York, I was like, I'm going to be out of work for 2 months to 2 years, probably,
right.
Because, where is it going to be? Who's going to want to go sit next to someone who's an inch away and that they don't know and have a room of 100 or 200 or more of them? Who's going to want to do that?
If I have to deal with this for another month, I'll be there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Maybe people just go, fuck it.
Yeah. Whatever.
Might get that way. I don't know. So
I don't want to feed that attitude, but I'm just trying to be honest about my own limits.
Hey, I hear you. So it's so I don't know. So it's everything's who knows
what's on your mind the most politically right now, and like what and just not the whole. Take it whatever way you want to go, but you've always been interested. You've done comedy since you were 19, but you've always been interested in politics. What's the through line?
What I'm doing, what I've been doing recently, and that's what I'm always doing, but I've been doing a little bit more now is, talking to friends in other country and trying to see what's going on there. I have a friend who's in Taipei, and that's one of the countries that seems like it's doing better than almost anybody.
Taiwan's done really well.
They got on it so early, and there's here if you're sick, they just tell you to stay home. That's where we're at as a country. Oh, you're not. It's not like if you're not going to be dying in the next hour, stay home. In Taiwan, people can go to the hospital and get taken care of, even if it's an absolute emergency. So I don't know. Recently, I've been trying to see what other countries are doing and how they're responding and how their governments are responding and thinking and planning. And then, I think about this country, how it's just, even if you look at it compared to European countries, I think we're a much more capitalist country than Europe.
Definitely. Yeah.
Even in Europe, even in London, on Sunday, their stores are closed. It's like in New York has 24-hour electronic stores. If you want to get something at a certain hour, it's like, you just got to wait a couple days. If it's Saturday night and you want to get something, you're like, oh yeah, you just got to wait till Monday, and we're like, what, and they have pubs where you can just walk in there, sit on a couch, not order anything, talk with people for 2 hours, and nobody will tell you to order anything, and then you can leave, and that's okay. It's just like, that's a bizarre concept here. We're much more buy, shop, sell.
Right. Even within those super limited differences, it's crazy.
Yeah. And then, even in, so many places, they'll have things that are fucked up, but at least so many of them will have some kind of a universal healthcare system. So at least you don't have to worry about that shit so much. And so it's just, here in this country, and obviously we're doing much better than a lot of countries out there. There's a lot of countries that are, more corrupt than us, and don't have much infrastructure or money. But when you see a government in this country that's actively not just doing a bad job or an incompetent job, but actually intentionally doing a bad job and trying to hurt people and make things harder make things harder on people, it's scary and it's angering. And so the thing I think about a lot is how do we fight? How do we succeed? How do we get rent canceled? How do we get some kind of universal basic income for a while at least? You got all these. We're in a historic pandemic, and Congress goes on vacation.
Literally on vacation.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
How? Like, if people aren't, if everyone's not going crazy with that, it's like, when you have companies like Amazon that make billions or trillions of dollars and basically don't pay taxes, if you're not protesting that, what are you going to protest? And then I try to think about, all right, well, how bad is it going to get? Because I remember I read the graphic novels Maus. Did you ever read those?
No, I never read those.
Art Spiegelman.
I've heard of them, but I never read them.
Oh, it's so good. It's basically.
Have you guys read those? No.
Yeah, it's Maus, and it's basically him talking to his father, who's a Holocaust survivor, and then he tells the story about going through the Holocaust during World War II, and because so many people think, they're like, well, that was terrible, but how could it really have happened? And it's just all these little steps. One little step of change, another little step of change. And even if you look at, with this pandemic that's going on, I remember being in New York, and I think it was like first week of March, the rules started changing. They started talking about it, and they're like, okay, no venues, you're not allowed no concerts at a place that's greater than 1,000 people. And then 2 days later be like, okay, it's 500. And then the next day it's like 250. And you're like, okay, what the fuck is going on here? It's like,
right.
Either you guys are slow, you don't know anything, or you know something, but nobody's going to believe you if you just say we're shutting the city down without any baby steps first, And so all these things that happen, just like, New York canceling the presidential primary, it's like, okay, that's a step. What's the next step going to be? So.
Right. And I love that you say that, because I think this is another, obviously we got to stay in and isolate and all of that. Nobody's questioning that. And you got to question the people that are questioning that, frankly. But at the same time, like, you cannot just give the worries about civil liberties, and you can't just let that be. And so much of what's happened the last several years is and again, it's this other like bullshit liberal, like, oh, that's an Alex Jones thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know that being concerned about surveillance is just an Alex Jones thing. I don't know that having a gradual, radical reduction in basic civil liberties, as well as the way the bailouts, everything else has been handled at an enormous, even greater concentration of power and wealth. My point, but I think that's great. I think you're 100% right.
And the surveillance, all these things are huge issues. We basically have a government that's run by rich people, and they're taking care of their rich friends,
Right.
Anyone who's, it's not just, obviously, the less money you have, the less white you are, the more you're going to be oppressed in this country, and it's terrifying. And but I think many people don't realize that it's very expansive. If you're anything less than a double-digit millionaire, you're a piece of shit. I mean, that's like, it often feels like that's how the government works. They don't care about you, because you don't have any power. And the only way people can have power is if everyone from every walk of life joins forces and fights, for everybody, So, those are things I think about, but trying to like think ahead, because even in comedy, so much of comedy is thinking ahead, where you are now, a lot of comedy is deception. I mean, that's basically what a setup is. You're throwing something out that you think is just regular, but it's actually a deception. And the punchline is, it's basically a sucker punch. It's something you don't see, but you actually should have seen it because you had a clue, So it's always thinking ahead and analyzing every situation, because even when you're doing crowd work, you're taking in so many things at once. The server's coming over there. This person went up and got to the bathroom. This guy's ignoring his girlfriend and hitting on a girlfriend at another table. And then you got some Trumpers sitting over here. You got some progressive college kids sitting over there. You're taking in all these things and trying to weave things around and lead things. So so thinking ahead is something but thinking ahead can also cause a lot of anxiety, and it can cause a lot of unnecessary anxiety sometimes, because you'll go in directions and be like, all right, but when you have a government, I mean, I think that's one reason I'm digressing here, but I think that's one reason that hoarding happens, right. And there's been some shaming of hoarding, but if you think about it, one of the reasons people hoard is they know the government's not going to be there to fucking help them. Mm-hmm. So it's like every person for themselves. And that's why
that flows from the top down.
Yeah. And that's why it's been so great what, certain organizing groups have been doing in feeding people at need, whether they're sick people, elderly people, low income people, people with no income, but these are things that, and that's what's frustrating about the news sometimes. Well, they'll do this feel good story about some kids that saved up all their money from lemonade stands, and then they saved some people in this community. They gave them some food or something.
So atrocious.
They gave them some masks. It's like, that's great they're doing that, but the government should be, our taxes go to the government to help us. That's what it's supposed to be, and that's not what's happening. So that shit gets scary. Yeah.
Judah, I really hope you'll come on again and hang out with us more if you can. Yeah. That would be awesome. And could you, I mean, look, this show, we started in 2017. We do pretty well. I'm not going to lie. But do you have any parting championship tips for the TMBS crew?
Well, just remember, everybody listening and watching and all you guys, we're fucking winners, okay? And when winners know winners, we fucking win. And we got to stick together. We got to fucking fight, man. Yeah, just fucking, be smart, keep fighting, and everybody's got to come together, man. It's like, the people in power want us to be divided. We got to come together. People have got to do it. It's always been that way, but we got to do it, Mm-hmm. But I'm around. I'll be doing a lot of, I would have already put out, I was just about to be filming a new 90-minute, stand-up film, but I can't do any live shows now. So I film lots of my sets anyway. So I'm putting together stuff, and I'll be putting out probably at least 2 new stand-up albums this year, as well as a new special. I don't know if be on any paid platform. If nobody's interested in buying it, I'll just self-release it on YouTube or something. And I have an old page I didn't use for years, and I'm just starting to reactivate it. So on my Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. I'm going to start putting out clips, at least several a week. So I'll start doing that. And then I'm going to try to do some of these Zoom stand-up shows, where
Awesome.
It's kind of like, it's kind of like what we're doing now, except it's just one person and then people watching. So it seems like I've watched a few shows. It seems like technologically it's a little difficult, it's a little different, but possibly doable. So that's what I'm looking into.
That's awesome. Well, Judah Freidlander, thanks so much, brother.
Yeah,
Stay safe.
Much love. Stay safe. We'll do.
Much love. Stay safe. Talk to you soon. All right. That was awesome. We were talking about the reaction times.
I just want to say, for anybody who was wondering what the Morse code on his hat said, it did indeed say "World Champion." So,
yeah, no, that's his brand,
right? Yeah, I just had to look it up. I'm like, I bet once I got the WO, I'm like, okay, I think we know. What this is.
World Champion, without a doubt.
That's beautiful.
Of course, that was a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, it was.
That's so awesome. I love the bit about the oligarchy feeling like a dictatorship in humidity.
That was too good.
That was really good. I just have to say, I have watched I've watched his stand-up plenty of times, and his stand-up is really funny. And especially because, again, I'm telling you, I don't find maybe it is just what's being selected, but most of these new Netflix specials and everything are just totally unwatchable.
Yeah.
And extremely just the kind of corporate woke, just awful. And he's incredibly funny. And I did not watch that much 30 Rock, but it is just, it is funny. I would not have anticipated 10 years ago that the funniest character, in the writer's room on 30 Rock, that I would be bullshitting with him about politics on a thing called Zoom.
I was flashing back to seeing him on Conan, just 10 years ago, just with the hats, that. It's a great bit, because especially once the thought that he's put behind it, it is such a perfect, the guy that. What was the question? Oh shit! I already forgot the bit already. But it's the idea that you're going to climate change, right? So it's climate change. I like that because it's feminine to basically face the worst case scenario of things. So you just have to put an optomistic scenario on it and act manly through it. And then,
I think that's a great.
I like climate change. I like Europeans need healthcare because they have weaker genetics and they aren't confident.
The embarrassing thing, that's something I probably would have said at 14, at the height of my shitheadedness.
Yeah. They don't need it because they have weak genetics and aren't confident. That's awesome. All right, guys, we're gonna go to the post game.
Michael, can I just say something really quick?
Yeah, of course.
Just because I realized when everything was going on under the gym, I forgot to shout out Housing Justice for All, which is a really important resource for people looking for help when it comes to rent and sort of organizing around the issue. So Housing Justice for All, definitely check that out. Awesome.
All right. Well, guys, we're going to go to the post game. Hopefully we won't have any other technical problems. I do apologize about that. Spectrum, not good. So we're gonna
nor is optimum, folks.
Nor is optimum, folks. Frankly, a lot of them are doing very, very terrible jobs. We've got Ben Burgess, we got Joshua Kahn Russell. We've got a bunch of stories to get to. As always, go to patreon.com/TMBS. Become a patron of the Michael Brooks Show. At the $8 a month, you get every single piece of content. And we still need to get to our first 4,000 patrons. Our ultimate kind of baseline goal is 6,000 patrons. Those are the goals. Let's get there. And in exchange, you get best show in the game in terms of overall content. Very confident about that and really proud of what we're doing. If you're new to YouTube and you haven't yet, certainly hit subscribe and hit the like button. And you can also check out Against the Web. Order it at Red Emma's, write a review for it at Amazon, and check out Literary Hangover. And we will see you in about 5-10 minutes on the post game. Thank you.